We all know life changes, so why letting go is so hard? Buddhist wisdom. No one reaches adulthood without meeting impermanence face to face. Think back to your childhood. There was a toy you loved, maybe a stuffed animal, maybe a favorite blanket, and one day it was gone. Lost, broken, thrown away. You cried, and somewhere in that small grief, a seed of understanding was planted. Things don't last. Then came bigger losses, a pet that died, a friend who moved away, a grandparent whose voice you can still hear in your memory, but whose hand you can no longer hold. Each loss taught the same lesson, over and over. Nothing stays. Life moves. People leave. The things we hold eventually slip through our fingers. By the time we are adults, we have witnessed impermanence so many times that it should no longer surprise us. We know the truth. We accept it. At least we think we do. And it's not just life experience that confirms this. Science tells us the same story. Every cell in your body is in a constant state of renewal. The atoms that make up your hand today are not the same atoms that were there 7 years ago. The universe itself is expanding, moving, changing at every scale, from galaxies to molecules. Impermanence is not a belief. It is the basic fabric of reality. When someone says, "Life is impermanent," we nod. Of course it is. No one argues. No one says, "Actually, I think things last forever." We all agree. And yet, and here is the paradox that we must sit with, if we truly understood impermanence, why does loss still devastate us? Why do we still wake up at 3 a.m., replaying conversations with people who are gone? Why do we scroll through old photos and feel a tightness in our chest, as if some part of us still refuses to believe those moments are over? Here is something worth noticing. We are often very good at offering this truth to others. When a friend is heartbroken, we say, "Time heals everything. This will pass." When someone loses a job, we remind them, "Something better will come. Nothing is permanent." We speak these words with confidence, with kindness, and we mean them. But when it's our own heart that is breaking, when it's our own loss, suddenly, the words feel hollow. We know they're true, but knowing doesn't stop the ache. We teach others to let go, while we ourselves are still holding on. This is not hypocrisy. This is not weakness. This is a clue, a signal pointing to something the Buddha understood very deeply, that there is a vast difference between knowing something in the mind and seeing it in the heart. In the Buddha's teaching, wisdom is not a single thing. It has layers, it has depth, and most of us, without realizing it, are living at the surface. The first level is called Suttamaya Panya, wisdom that comes from hearing and learning. This is the knowledge we gain from books, from teachers, from podcasts like this one. Someone tells us, all things are impermanent, and we receive that information. We store it in memory. We can repeat it, quote it, even explain it to others. But this kind of wisdom is like knowing that fire is hot because someone told you. You've never touched the flame yourself. The word hot is in your head, but the sensation of heat has never reached your skin. This is why you can read 100 quotes about letting go. You can save them on your phone, print them on your wall, and still feel completely shattered when someone you love walks away. The knowledge was real, but it was borrowed. It hadn't become your own. The second level is called Suttamaya Panya, wisdom that comes from thinking and reflecting. This is deeper. Here, you don't just accept what you've heard. You examine it. You reason through it. You sit with the idea of impermanence and trace its logic. If everything changes, then this relationship will change. This body will change. This moment will pass. You see the truth not just as a quote, but as a principle that applies to your life. This level of understanding is more powerful than the first. It shapes how you think. It can even bring a certain calm. But here is the painful truth. Most of us live right here, at this second level, and it's exhausting. We understand impermanence intellectually. We accept it logically. And yet when change comes, we still suffer. The mind agrees, but the heart is not convinced. And then we blame ourselves. We think, I know better than this. Why can't I just move on? What's wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with you. This is simply the limit of intellectual understanding. It can take you far, but it cannot take you all the way. The third level is called Bhavanamaya Panya, wisdom that arises from direct meditative experience. This is not about thinking. This is about seeing, clearly, directly, in the present moment. At this level, impermanence is no longer a concept you believe in. It is something you witness again and again in your own body and mind. You sit in meditation and you observe. A breath arises, then fades. A sensation appears, then dissolves. A thought emerges, lingers for a moment, and is gone. Nothing has to be forced. Nothing has to be figured out. You simply watch the river of experience flowing, and in that watching, something shifts. This is the level of wisdom that brings final transformation. The first two levels are precious. They prepare the ground. They point us in the right direction. But they cannot do the final work. Only direct seeing can do that. And here is the gentle truth. Most of us haven't arrived at this third level. Not because we are weak, not because we are failures, but because we stopped at understanding. We collected ideas, we absorbed philosophy, and we mistook that for the whole journey. But the Buddha didn't just explain the truth. He offered a method, a training, for seeing it ourselves. So now we must ask the harder question. If the path exists, why don't we walk it? If direct seeing can free us, why do we stay trapped in the first two levels of knowing? The Buddha's answer was precise. He identified the chains that bind us, and he gave them a name. The first chain is tanha, often translated as craving, but perhaps better understood as thirst. It is the endless wanting that runs beneath the surface of our lives. And the Buddha distinguished three kinds. The first is kama tanha, the craving for pleasant sensations. We want what feels good. We want comfort, pleasure, sweetness. There is nothing wrong with enjoying pleasant things. But when we crave them, when we need them, when our peace depends on having them, then we have handed our freedom over to conditions we cannot control. The second is bhava tanha, the craving to become. This is subtler and often harder to see. It is the drive to be someone, to be successful, to be loved, to be admired, to be a certain kind of person. We build an image of who we want to be, and then we cling to that image as if it were life itself. The third is vibhava tanha, the craving to escape, to not exist, to get rid of what is unpleasant. When pain arises, we don't just want it to pass. We want it gone now. We want to be anywhere but here, anyone but who we are in this moment. Look closely at your own experience, and you will see these three threads weaving through your days. And you will notice something important. We don't just want things. We want the feelings those things give us. We don't miss the relationship. We miss the version of ourselves that felt loved inside that relationship. We don't fear losing the job. We fear losing the identity, the security, the sense of meaning that job provided. The craving is not really for the object. It is for what the object makes us feel about ourselves. And this brings us to the second chain, the one that is perhaps most difficult to see. The Buddha called it attavadupadana, clinging to the belief in a solid, unchanging self. We spend our whole lives constructing a me. We build it from memories, from roles, from achievements and failures, from what others think of us, from what we think of ourselves. I am this kind of person. I like these things. I am defined by these relationships, this career, this history. And the more we build, the more we have to protect. This is why loss feels like death. When a relationship ends, we don't just lose a person. We lose the part of me that was built around that person. When we fail, we don't just experience failure. We feel like we are disappearing. But here's what makes this so hard to see. The mind doesn't show us this directly. We think we're grieving them. We think we're upset about the situation. But underneath, we're often grieving a version of ourselves that no longer exists, and we don't even realize it. The mind experiences a threat to its own structure, its own story, and it panics. It grips. It refuses to let go. But the Buddha didn't teach that nothing exists. He taught something far more precise and liberating, that what we call me is not a fixed thing. It is a process, a constantly changing flow of body, sensations, thoughts, and awareness. There is experience, yes. There is knowing. There is life. But there is no permanent owner hiding inside the experience, no unchanging self standing apart from the flow. When we see this clearly, not as an idea, but as a direct perception, the need to protect begins to soften. There is nothing solid to defend. And then there is the third chain, which is not separate from the first two, but arises from them. Fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of being nothing. Fear of what we might find if we stop running, stop building, stop clinging. In the Buddha's teaching, fear is not the ultimate root. The deepest roots are ignorance and craving. But for most of us, fear is the first thing we meet when we try to let go. It is the emotional face of tanha and attavadupadana. When we believe, I am what I have, then every loss becomes a threat to our existence. When we crave to become someone, then every failure feels like annihilation. Behind every, I know it's over, but I still check their phone. Behind every, I should be past this by now, why does it still hurt? There is often a quieter voice we don't say out loud. I'm afraid of who I'll be without this. I'm afraid of what's left when this is gone. That fear is not a flaw. It is not something to judge or push away. It is a signal, a messenger pointing back to the craving and self-view underneath. And it deserves our compassion, not our condemnation. So now we've seen the chains, the craving, the belief in a solid self that must be protected, the fear that arises when that self feels threatened. And perhaps you're wondering, if these are so deeply rooted, how do we work with them? How do we move from understanding to freedom? Here is where the Buddha's teaching becomes truly radical. He did not say, try harder to let go. He did not say, force yourself to stop wanting, because he understood something profound, that trying to force yourself to let go is itself another form of craving. It is vibhava tanha, the craving to get rid of, to escape, to push away what is uncomfortable. You cannot fight craving with more craving. You cannot think your way out of a trap that was built by thinking. So what did he offer instead? He said, see clearly. Not believe this. Not repeat this until you feel better. Just see. Look directly at what is actually happening, moment to moment, in your own experience. And keep looking until the truth reveals itself. This is where we return to the third level of wisdom, Bhavanamaya Panya. The first two levels, hearing and thinking, give us a map. But a map is not the territory. You can study a map of the ocean your whole life and still not know what it feels like to swim. The third level is the swimming. It is direct experience. And the Buddha gave us a very specific practice for cultivating it. He called it Satipatthana, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. You sit. You bring attention to the body, the breath moving in and out, the sensations arising and fading. You notice feelings as they come, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, without grabbing, without pushing away. You observe the states of mind, and you watch the contents of mind, thoughts, images, memories, appearing and disappearing like clouds passing through an empty sky. But here is something important. This watching is not passive. It is not daydreaming. It is not sitting with a vague, hazy awareness while the mind wanders wherever it wants. The Buddha used a word for this quality: appamada, diligence, heedfulness. It means to practice with care, to stay present, again and again, even when the mind pulls away. There is a difference between glancing at the surface of a lake and sitting still at its edge, watching patiently until the depths reveal themselves. The first is casual. The second requires what the Buddha called sama vayama, right effort. Not the effort of forcing, but the effort of showing up fully with all of your attention, moment after moment. The effort to return, again and again, to this breath, this sensation, this moment. Without this quality, the practice stays shallow. We sit, but we don't really see. And the deep patterns, the craving, the self-view, the fear, remain untouched. But when diligence is present, something begins to happen. You start to notice that everything you observe is moving. The breath you just took is already gone. The sensation you just felt has already changed. The thought you just had has already dissolved. And when you see this, truly see it, not just think about it, something shifts. The craving begins to lose its grip. The fear begins to soften. Not because you fought them, but because you saw through them. You saw that what you were protecting was never solid to begin with. This is the Buddha's gentle revolution. He doesn't ask you to become someone different. He simply invites you to look closely, honestly, diligently at what is already here. And in that looking, something opens. You begin to notice that you are not your thoughts. Thoughts come and go, but awareness remains. You begin to suspect that the self you've been defending so fiercely might not be as solid as you believed. And slowly, the question, "How do I let go?" starts to dissolve. You realize there is nothing solid to hold. There never was. The path is not about becoming someone who doesn't feel. It's about seeing so clearly that you are no longer imprisoned by what you feel. It's about discovering that peace was never something you had to create. It was always here, underneath the grasping, underneath the fear, waiting for you to stop and look. And that looking can begin anytime. Even now, even here.